Okay. Hopefully this is recording, and hopefully you can see me. Yeah, maybe. Yes, so another day, another vlog. Let's see, a lot of ums and ahs so far in this one. My voice, perhaps you can tell, I'm recovering from, whatever disease made my voice not work so well. I managed to teach 3 classes, even with almost no voice, by, of course, the old teacher's trick of just giving them a test, which seemed to work pretty well. But anyway, I think finally I can do another one of these. Somebody did ask, Jess has requested a Harry Potter special edition, which I'm keen to do. I'm very, there's a lot to talk about with young Harry Potter. But today, I'd like to talk about Ender's Game, because I've just finished reading that, and I'm going on to, I don't know how many Ender games there are. I bought a boxed set that I assumed would be all of them. There was 4, but then now I've heard that there's other ones as well. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about that because I think it's an interesting book to discuss. I won't say that it is the best book ever or anything like that, but I will award it one Robert Indifferent grunt of meh. That's my indifferent grunt. Didn't quite sound so indifferent that time, but you get the idea. I did enjoy it, and I'll try to drive at the same time, so keep in mind everything's happening. So anyway, Ender's Game, it's a book by Orson Scott Card. He originally wrote this. He had another book in mind, and he wanted to explain the history, give some context. But if he just wrote that in the same book, it was going to be a bit long and boring. So instead he turned the context into a whole other book, a prequel, which became Ender's Game. Excuse me. Orson Scott Card himself, the author, is, at the moment he's famous for being a bigoted Mormon. Now, the fact that he's a bigot, the fact that he hates gays and so on, we can hold that against him. We can justifiably say that those things that he does are wrong. The fact that he's a Mormon, I don't really hold that against him. I know there are good people who are Mormon and bad people. It's just like anything else. I still, when people hear that he's a bigoted Mormon, they'll often connect the two and say, oh, well, it's because he's a Mormon. But I wouldn't claim that. I'd say it's more just because he himself is an ass. But despite that, we can still enjoy the book. We can appreciate the things he's done right. For example, Ender's Game. I will, when I'm going to talk about it, I don't know how much time, we'll see, depends on traffic, but there will be spoilers. So if you've never read the book, or seen the movie, I suppose if you've seen the movie, that's okay too, but if you've never seen the book but you intend to read it, stop watching now and go and read it. It'll only take you a few hours to get through the whole thing. It's not a very big or heavy book. Even if you're not sure, I'd say go and read it first, or watch the movie. The movie's got Harrison Ford, so you can't really go wrong there. Anyway, as far as the book goes, the story in the book, a lot of people say, there are some mind-blowing moments, there's twists and so on. To be honest, though, I think perhaps because I quite like science fiction, and I've read a lot of recent science fiction, the same themes, the same ideas have been used quite a lot, so nothing in there really struck me as new or mind-blowing. It probably was when the book first came out, and maybe if I'd read the book when I was younger, it might have been more amazing. Nonetheless, it was definitely worth reading. When I was reading it, so the book itself is called Ender's Game. So we know that straight away you know that the game is important. There's going to be something about the game, or maybe he'll see life as a game, or there's some sort of game theme in there. But apart from that, there are a few other themes that I really that I noticed. And the first one, given my on-again, off-again interest in ancient Greek history, was the Greek theme, actually. Now, I don't think Orson Scott Card himself is Greek, but it was very clear. They talk about a hegemony. They talk about strategos as the military leader. These are terms straight from ancient Greece. And apart from that, they frequently talk about Philip and Alexander. There's even Demosthenes. Demosthenes plays a big part. And that in itself is quite interesting, because Ender is portrayed as, the next Alexander, Philip of Macedon was the father of Alexander. And so the two, they basically go together. One made the other in more ways than one. Demosthenes was the great opponent of Philip, always speaking against Philip. So it's quite interesting that two characters that are meant to be quite close, they have a very strong bond, but they're portrayed by others as two opposing people from history. Certainly that's significant. Certainly Orson Scott Card has studied his Greek history a bit when he was writing this. So he's certainly aware of that, and I'd say it's a very deliberate thing. One of the other characters is portrayed as John Locke. I believe it's John Locke. And that's interesting too, but in a different way. Okay. So, certainly the Greek theme. And when I was reading this, and hearing about actually, before I explain that anymore, I should point out the first thing that struck me hard, is that the aliens are called buggers. And I don't know, in Australia that word is perhaps a bit different to the way Orson sees it. So, the word bugger comes up, and it comes up frequently, and it's always in your face. I'm sure in the movie, I think in the movie they changed the name just because it'll make you laugh. It's just the blatant use of the word bugger a little bit too often. But anyway, so back to the Greek connection. I was expecting something like one of the Greek wars. Perhaps not. Alexander was always invading. He went to other countries and invaded them. But given the way the buggers were portrayed, I was expecting something like the Battle of Marathon, or something like that, where this huge overwhelming invading army came and the Earth had to defend. But there's a little bit more to it than that, because as you read, you realize that the Battle of Marathon has already taken place. You might think about the Battle of Thermopylae if you're, but with the Spartans, but I don't think that's quite it. But anyway, so you can kind of look for these things in there, and certainly what Ender does is, his job, the job he's being raised for, is to go and invade. So in a way, it's kind of he does fulfill the role of Alexander in that respect. But yes, there's more to it than that, of course. One of the other things that hit me was the presence of religion in the book. Now, as I mentioned, Orson Scott Card is a Mormon, and if I remember, I can only remember one character being pointed out as Mormon, and she keeps it under wraps. In most modern science fiction that I read, religion is kind of left out. It's assumed that we've moved past religion. But with Orson, he kind of sees it as, religion is, there was a word for it. It's not illegal, but it's a counter something or other. But they take away people's right to freely practice religion, or freely express religion. So the people are still religious, and the religions still exist. In fact, I just read the first few pages of the next book, and they're saying, Catholics have been around for 3,000 years since the first book. And, well, if you know your history, that's not exactly how religions work. But nonetheless, he definitely sees religions as existing and as taking a big part. Enda himself, though, is certainly not religious. In fact, he's raised in exclusion from any sort of religious influences, except for what basically seeps through. So yeah, the presence of all the different religions was quite interesting. And I did try to spot whether the people who were given different religions were, whether there were any stereotypes that go along with them. So that was interesting. Apart from that, the enemy, the buggers, they were quite interesting as well. They gave a kind of a false analogy, comparing them to ants with queens, when really the way they act is not like ants at all. In fact, if you kill the queen, there's some sort of psychic link between the queen and her minions. Now, if you kill the queen ant, the ants will keep on fighting. Ants, they don't have not a brain that we would recognize, but a bundle of neurons, and some very basic rules that they follow that will basically let you predict how they would react in any given situation. The buggers, on the other hand, they are all continuously controlled by the queen. Basically, they're all part of the queen, although separated, not one continuous body. Now, that is quite interesting. It's certainly a science fiction idea. It's not necessarily, we might call it psychic, but there are a lot of different ways that animals could develop communication systems similar to that we don't recognize, but if we were looking at if we're looking at a compass, it's hard to see how it moves, but if we understand magnetism, it's pretty obvious. But the aliens themselves, this is one of the nice things about it, is the aliens were in fact peaceful. Now, it certainly didn't seem like that when the aliens were allegedly invading, but we're never given enough of the first series, the first wars, to actually know who struck the first blow. Apparently, and this is kind of hinted, they were living on an asteroid in our solar system for quite some time without any problems. The characters in the book say that they were observing us getting ready to invade, but I'm not entirely sure that they were meant to be said that way. They certainly did defend themselves, though. But again, the idea of it being completely foreign, that every single person would be a separate genetic line, is interesting. You know, there's a lot of interesting ideas to consider there. So all these things were there in the book, but there are other things that aren't really explicitly stated in the book as well, that you have to kind of assume or read into it. The role of Ender's friends. Now, if you read the book, when Ender goes to this commander school, and there he gets to hear his friends, but he never ever sees them. And that's quite significant, because you're not told if it's really them or if it's just a simulation. If it's somebody using their voices to make him feel more able to trust his commanders. Basically, it might be a trick. His friends might not really have been there. And I know he, later on, I've heard that he what is it? He goes back and changes the story a bit and makes Bean a superhero. But reading Ender's Game as it's written, I kind of get the feeling that he was the only one, and that's the reason why he's never able to see them. Except there's one point where they tell a joke that it seems like only they could have known, but nonetheless, even then, and you know, why would the simulations get tired, etc. It's not explicit, but the possibility is there that his friends never made it to Commander School. That as well was just a simulation. Now, when I was first reading it, I had a feeling that my first impression was that the buggers were not actually going to be aliens at all. They were going to be humans. So maybe a different colony had separated long ago. They wore one type of spacesuit, we wore another one, and something like that. And, you know, being portrayed as aliens, but of course the media would hide the fact that they were actually humans, because that would make the war all the more terrible. So I thought maybe that was going to happen. Or I thought maybe the simulation, they were being taught that these aliens existed, but actually the military force was going to conquer the Earth. You know, they were going to send the troops to invade Earth and take over, and basically to create a unified world order. Neither of those things happened. But there was for a long time the possibility. He left that option in until later on, when you find out, oh no, that couldn't be the case. So he waits until the last possible moment to take away these possibilities. Okay. And I think that's good writing. Let people make theories, and let the theories be consistent, as long as whatever the author actually goes with it is also consistent. The things like the faster than light travel, the effect of time dilation, they use that to basically keep one particular general alive so that he can actually train Ender later on. This general was a hero from the First War. And the way they mention it is 70 years cut down to about 8 years, speeding up. It doesn't quite make sense to me, because they accelerate. Obviously you have to accelerate close to light speed to get that sort of time dilation, because that is pretty huge. But they accelerate, and then they manage to decelerate and turn around and come back. The deceleration process would be pretty slow. You know, this would take years in itself, and while you're decelerating, then the time dilation. Basically, I don't think the math adds up in that particular situation. I think it should have been a lot more than 8 years for him. But again, this is science fiction, and he's writing. The story is not about the wonders of space travel. Oh yeah, we should. I'm running out of time, but I should get back to the game. Because one of the things that comes up in the story is a particular game that he plays on the computer. And apparently, a lot of them play it, and his teachers get concerned when he becomes stuck at one particular one, the Giant's Drink, where he's given the option to drink two cups. One of them he's told is poison, and the other is not. So he's stuck there, and they're obviously they're aware of this particular part in the simulation. This is a common part that other potential generals have been through as well. Now the game itself, it makes that particular game very significant. He's constantly reminded of what he did and how he got through that game. It comes up again and again. He always walks through and sees the consequences of what he did there. And later on, things actually happen in the game that the teachers aren't aware of, that the computer system itself seems to somehow have pulled out. But later still, we find out that not only was the computer pulling these images, but somehow the buggers were also aware of what was happening in the game. And they use that as a way to communicate with Ender himself. Basically by recreating certain portions. And they're able to, and this is even more, judge the significance of different parts, and so use them to give him a message. So it seems to me there's some sort of indication that their artificial intelligence, the way that they program this, was actually not human developed, but something from the buggers, you know, some of their systems. And it hints at perhaps the way the buggers would communicate, because obviously they had different queens. The queens would have to communicate with each other. So there are hints there that the human systems and computer systems were in part designed or developed using bugger technology. I keep using the word bugger, but wait till you read the book. And that makes it all the more interesting when you consider, you know, if that particular game was using it, then wouldn't it make sense if they were using these advanced things to also use it in the tactical systems, the military simulations and so on that they use, for example, in the command school when Ender's doing his simulations. And if they were doing that, were the buggers perhaps aware the entire time of what was going on? Did they play it? Did the buggers play it as a game, knowing what was going to happen? It's not really explicitly stated. There's one point where Ender is told, you know, it wasn't until they saw the human fleet that they knew that they were going to be destroyed. But they did know that they were going to be destroyed. The Queen says that. So perhaps, you know, the story is all the more tragic. It's this race being invaded, knowing that they're going to be destroyed, but doing what they believe the humans expect, just so the humans can play it out and have their vengeance. Excuse me. Anyway, I've run out of time for now, but Ender's Game, if you haven't read it yet, then I don't know what you were doing watching this. I told you not to. But nonetheless, if you needed any more pushing, I would say go out and read it. It's worth reading. It may or may not blow you away, but it is one of the better books out there. And you can borrow it from the library. You don't even have to give Orson Scott Card a cent. Okay. Ooh, catch you another time.